And what's a bit of an older story that's kind of coming back around this week and sort of come full circle? Frank Mir was officially suspended for 2 years by USADA for failing a drug test. He had made a claim that it was from tainted kangaroo meat, and he, even with this suspension being levied down, he still feels like he was wronged here. He did bring up a few good points as far as what options a fighter has to fight against a positive drug test if they get popped for one, where he's talking about the costs that are involved. And to be fair, this is kind of like a tough one to deal with because, again, when you're dealing with these drug tests, it's not like it's a cheap thing for the companies to do. It's not a cheap thing to buy. So if you were to expect the UFC to have to pay for every appeal, especially when you have fighters who would probably be taking advantage of it, that probably wouldn't be the best situation. Then every time somebody pops for a drug, obviously you're going to play it off like, oh, me? No way. Couldn't happen. Let me appeal it. And it's just going to cost the UFC a bunch of money that they really shouldn't have to pay. As far as the companies themselves, whether they should have to cover it, I don't know how you could do that either. You can't really just get a bunch of free drug tests to double check and do all that. So for Frank Mir, this takes him out for 2 years. He was in a position leading into the suspension where I think a lot of fans, myself included, felt like it was probably about time for him to retire anyway. His chin obviously isn't holding up very well. Now at heavyweight, it's tough to have a good chin for a while with all the shots that you're taking, all the hard shots you're taking, but the way he was going down seemed a little bit easier than most heavyweights. So at this point, if he is going to continue, this could possibly be a good thing, and that it gives him some time where as long as he's not sparring too hard in the meantime, he can kind of recover a bit. But even still, he's not really going to ever make a run for the heavyweight title again, even with the heavyweight division being as bad as it is. He's already been a UFC champion. It's not like he feels the need to like cross it off his resume or cross that off of his bucket list before he leaves the sport. So if you're Frank Mir, you can keep doing podcasting. I don't know what kind of money he's able to make out of that. He can definitely do a lot of seminars. He's a guy who has a big enough name where if he wants to just kind of live humbly, he can open up his own gym. He can teach seminars. He can make a very strong living, make six figures, and be happy. But if he still wants to kind of live the life as a fighter, this is going to make it really tough for him. And I hope he doesn't. I know he wants to keep fighting. I know that ending your career that way isn't the best, but if you're Frank Mir, if you really enjoy the martial arts, you're going to be training anyway. If he decides to take a retirement fight, kind of like a Brad Pickett type of fight, after the suspension is up and just let it go out, that's fine. I respect that if that's how you want to end your career, if you'd rather end it in the cage as opposed to in the doctor's office. I get that. That's perfectly fine. But for him, maybe he's right. Maybe he is getting screwed here. Maybe the fact that it's so expensive to appeal is a real problem. Maybe, I mean, obviously, if you're looking at USADA, a lot of these drug testing laboratories, a bit of a problem that they have to deal with that doesn't get talked about a lot is it's so important for them to be right that if they actually do get something wrong, it's almost in their best interest to kind of hide it or to kind of make it as difficult as possible for people to kind of realize it. Because if you start having cases where USADA is starting to have false positives, well, then the next time a positive comes up, how can you be so sure that they got that one right too, or if that one's false? So it's a tough situation for a fighter if you get tested positive. In some cases, these guys, they're able to prove it's a tainted supplement. They get off a little bit shorter, but even still, they get a suspension for it. But for Frank Mir, at this point, there's not a whole lot more he can do. It doesn't seem like it would make sense for him to really try to do a whole lot more, and hopefully just kind of wind down, figure out what you want to do after fighting, get everything set up for that, and hopefully, if he's going to fight one more time, just make sure you settle in, find a guy who, I mean, I'm trying to think if Brad Pickett was supposed to fight. He fought Cheeto Vera, but I believe it was a guy out of Alliance. I can't remember who it was that he was originally supposed to fight. But regardless, the idea stands that at heavyweight, you find a guy who's outside of the top 25 that you can end your career on. Let it be a competitive fight, and hopefully for Frank Mir, he gets a win. He ends his career in the octagon instead of in the doctor's office and moves on. And I mean, really, there's a lot for him to be proud of. Multiple-time UFC heavyweight champion, first guy to finish Nogueira, finished him twice, as a matter of fact. A lot of great things that he did in his time, and hopefully this kind of spurs the end of it before he really does a whole lot more damage to his health.